How's it going, everyone? Good evening or afternoon. Whatever time of day it may be, good day to you. Earlier today, my son asked me a question. And it wasn't the first time he's asked this question either. He's 6 years old. And he says, "Papa, what are we here for?" It was right when we got in the car to come home from school. And I said, "Well, what do you mean? What is our purpose?" He's like, "Yeah, why are we here on earth? What are we supposed to be doing? What are we supposed to do?" It's the first thing he said to me. And of course, every kid asks those questions. Here's the thing. My son asks it to me every week, at least once. And thank goodness that I'm at least an open-minded philosopher type person, because I realize how easily kids can be just told to, whatever they want to hear or whatever the parent wants them to hear. It's irrelevant what I told him because, of course, I said, you create your own purpose, your own reality. But I said, there's a lot of theories. I said, what do you think we're here for? And he said, I think we're here to take care of the earth. It's like, yeah? He goes, yeah. He goes, to keep the balance, to keep everything balanced. And I said, so what do you mean by balance? And he says, well, all the plants, if we didn't collect this and plant the seeds, then the plants would just disappear. And I explained to him his inconsistency in understanding there, that plants indeed do not need us. I proceeded to say, hey, if you had a stack of pennies this high and you took one out, that's the length of time humans have existed. Plants have existed much longer than us. And tried to put it a little bit in perspective for a 6-year-old, but of course without trying to get too technical. However, this isn't just your average 6-year-old. He watches TED Talks and he just stares. He's into, science shows, and he's very intelligent, and he's very into things. I got home and I opened his backpack and I found this. It's a little earth with a handprint on it. It's got a little thing there. It says, I can help save the earth. Write about what you will do to help save the planet. And he says, I will help save the earth by saving electricity, by turning off the lights. Also, I can recycle. I like the earth. How can you not like the earth, right? The mind of a child, so innocent. If you see how he spelled like recycle, it's, R-E-S-I-K-L-E. Electricity is L-E-C, electricity. It's just however kids hear it, they write it. They're not concerned with punctuation, grammar, semantics. They say what they mean. And that can be frustrating sometimes as a parent when you're trying to get your kid to understand something that's a little more important. However, it's a huge loss to the parent if they're not learning from their child. If you have children and they're not teaching you something, you're not learning from your kids, then you're not learning anything, because your kids are there to teach us what we want. And the truth is, human children, sure, they fight, and perhaps you could look at the way they act and say, okay, there's a little bit of pride there, or maybe it's just a little bit of, it's the me attitude, my toy. My 3-year-old comes in the room and he sees my 6-year-old with a truck that neither one of them have touched in months. And he runs over and starts crying and he wants it. What is that? Well, I think about those things because I think humans, we tend to grow up, and then many people get this idea that, well, humans naturally want to help and assist one another and share and love. But those are learned behaviors, many of them. I would say that it's virtually impossible, in my opinion, to distinguish learned behaviors from actual genetic behaviors, because most of them are learned. If love is something that's inherent within all of us, then you should be able to raise a feral child and have him come and want love. And I think that attention-seeking and love-seeking, of course, is something that probably is genetic merely because we need that to survive. Just like knowing how to eat or suckle when you're born. you know. So we don't learn everything, you know. Some behaviors are just genetic. But when it comes to a child asking you a question such as, what are we doing here and what's our purpose? That's a question open to interpretation. I imagine that millions and billions of children have asked their parents this question, and a whole lot of them have said, well, we're supposed to, you know, we're supposed to worship the Lord so we can go to heaven. Or we're supposed to follow the Quran so we can go to Allah. You know, when kids start asking, what is God and what's the devil? That's an easy question for parents that believe in a religion. But for those who don't, we have to teach our children to think for themselves. This is what happened to me as I was raised without any particular religion or belief system. However, my parents never had a lack thereof or a belief system. It just didn't come up. It wasn't a discussion that came up ever. And since my father passed away when I was 15, all I have left are his short poems and stories that he wrote, and they tell me a lot about what was going through his mind. But other than that, I don't know much about whether he was a super deep thinker. He'd love to go out to the desert and ponder these things, but when it comes to religion, I think maybe he just never talked about it because it was something that was too complex. In other words, I believe my father probably understood Zen. When he passed away, I inherited one of his little books, just to, you know, in some of his crap. There was just one book that I still have. It's called the book, or it's Confucius. It's an old, like 100-year-old book it was a Confucius quotes, and I remember my dad used to say Confucius say before he would say something, and but he couldn't explain those things to me because I was only 15 when he died, so I wasn't old enough to really talk about the deep things. But regardless, I was just never exposed to it. And so when I was finally exposed to religion and the ideas of life, you know, it took me a while to really say, why am I here and what should I be doing? I think I didn't even really start asking what my path should be until I was in my 30s. I was totally aware of the fact that I was born, that it was a crazy mystical world to live in, and that I would die one day, my mortality. But when you're young, you're too busy getting living. You're too busy getting on and figuring things out. And you're saying, oh, I've still got decades and decades and decades. And the next thing you know, you're 30, and then boom, you hit 40. And you say, okay, now I'm about halfway there, what now? And you start asking yourself, what should I be doing? And this is why many people have midlife crisis, breakdown, buy some sports car, you know, or try to ease the pain with materialism or travel, or try to escape the reality of the fact that maybe they're not happy where they are or with what they're doing. But the question still remains, is there a purpose for each person? I kind of have to cringe when I hear New Age type of philosophies that deal with saying that we have to find our purpose. I mean, even Manly Hawley's one of my favorite speakers ever, but I still don't agree with a lot of the things he says, you know, but there's certain things that come up about, you know, how we are important, or that we all have a life path. And I say, well, regardless of whether or not we have one or not, it can never be proven or disproven. In other words, my point is, whatever you do with your life is your life path. And when you stray from that, what that just means is you're straying from your passions. It's not that you're maybe straying from what... In other words, you can't distinguish whether you're straying from something in your heart you know you want to do, or whether you're straying something in your spiritual self that knows you should accomplish this. Whether it be a previous life, God, whatever you believe. My ultimate conclusion has been that it's really irrelevant. I don't believe necessarily in a life path, or overthinking it, or trying to figure out where we're actually from, nor where we're going. Those questions aren't any longer a concern of mine, because ultimately the past is an illusion, and the future is just an idea. But this present right now, as we're in it, we have to experience it. Every minute you spend thinking or dwelling on the past, if you're not learning from that, or thinking, oh, you don't want to make that mistake, if you're dwelling on the past or worrying about the future, you've just wasted the now. And then in the future, you will still have that same drama. So when you're looking for your life path, just do what you do. And when other people around you maybe are affected negatively, then you'll know you're maybe not on the right path. When you're affected negatively, you'll know you're not on the right path. And we all make mistakes, and we all do stupid things. We all have bad habits. Some of my guilts, sure, I don't consume a lot of drugs, but I do smoke pot and take kratom daily. But sugar is my big drug, honestly, and it's almost embarrassing. Like, I don't want to admit it. It's like I put too much sugar in my coffee. So the other day, I decided to boycott sugar. I started using stevia again because I've gone back and forth. But it's a flaw. It's something that we want, that instant gratification. And that's like our little mini vacation. Gratification. I'll think of something. We have these little moments where, a cup of coffee, a cigarette, whatever it might be for you, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, as long as in your heart you don't know you know that you're not damaging yourself. So if you're smoking, you know that you're harming yourself. So you might quit, or like I did, and then I started vaping, but I still might feel guilty if I vape too much. Thinking, well, it still might be harmful in some way. In other words, your path includes seeing the little quirks that come up in your daily life and realizing those are things to change. Your path is never a destination. Your path is a wheel, a circular wheel of waking up each day, curing new problems, and starting over until you feel like you've done something productive. And you can start slow, and you can work your way up. You can get to the point where you're actually feeling like you're accomplishing something. But if you're anything like me, it's very difficult to motivate and find the desire to quit something if you don't feel like there's a reason to. In other words, I don't just say, when somebody says living sober is much preferable to, let's say, getting high in the evening or, having altered states. And my question is, well, why? And then the answer might be, well, because then you're living life in reality. And then I would come back with, well, what is reality? Isn't it the existence you're living at the moment? And they say, well, you're out of your mind, you're not your normal self. And I would say, I'm constantly changing. What is my normal self? So these are the little things that, that make us wonder, what is reality? What is a normal state of being, if there's such a thing, which is just a ludicrous idea. In other words, normal is just the consensus whole of everything, the reality. And the consensus is often flawed by ignorance. There were times when I would defend society as a whole and say, well, if things are this way, then it's because people want them that way. But there's many other things where it's that way because people are too dumb to change it. And there are folks who are well into their 50s, 60s, and 70s who have never stopped to ask themselves, what are we here to do? What am I here to do? Which brings me full circle back to the kid and the question, what makes a child asks those questions out loud, but an adult hides and keeps them to himself? Now, I know many people who are great philosophers and, theologists and whatnot, theologians, people who want to go and discuss issues and discuss where we're from, but a majority of people just don't bring it up in a conversation. It's not normal subject matter. To a kid, there are no holds barred. They'll say anything. They'll do anything. They don't care. And we could learn a lot from that. And just like we see a child playing in the sandbox, and we get down on that level and realize we can still have fun building a sandcastle or a tower, we also have to remember that we can still have fun pondering those deep thoughts about life, whether we think we know it or not. Because ultimately, we're all a little bit delusional. So, namaste, my friends.